The colony of New Haven sat on a green moon far from Earth. 12,000 people lived there. They were simple people, farmers who grew food, teachers who taught children, families who wanted peace. They had no guns. They had no warships. They had nothing to protect themselves. They trusted the universe to leave them alone. It was a mistake. The morning started like any other morning. The twin suns rose over the hills and painted the sky in shades of orange and pink. Children walked to school with bags on their backs. Farmers checked their crops and talked about the weather. Lisa Grant, the colony administrator, sat in her office and looked at reports about grain production. She was 34 years old with brown hair and tired eyes. She had taken this job because she wanted to help people build a new life among the stars. She never saw the ships coming. The first explosion destroyed the communications tower. Lisa felt the ground shake and heard glass breaking somewhere in the building. She jumped from her chair and ran to the window. Black smoke rose from the north side of the colony. Then she saw them, dark shapes falling from the sky like metal rain. Ships, dozens of ships. They were not human ships. They had come. Lisa had heard stories about everyone in the galaxy had heard stories. They were slavers. They attacked colonies that could not fight back. They took people and sold them to the highest bidder. The Galactic Council had condemned them many times, but words meant nothing to creatures like They did what they wanted because no one stopped them. Lisa ran to the emergency console and hit the distress button. The system was damaged but still working. She grabbed the microphone and started talking. Her voice shook, but she forced herself to speak clearly. She gave the colony coordinates. She described what was happening. She begged for help. Outside her window, she could see soldiers marching through the streets. They were tall and covered in gray scales. Their eyes were red and showed no emotion. They carried weapons that fired bolts of blue plasma. They shot anyone who ran. They grabbed anyone who surrendered. A woman screamed somewhere close. Then the scream stopped. Lisa kept talking into the microphone. She did not know if anyone was listening. She did not know if help would come. But she had to try. She had to believe that someone out there cared about 12,000 helpless people. 4 light hours away, Commander Daniel Morgan was sleeping in his quarters aboard the carrier Indomitable. He was 41 years old with gray hair at his temples and scars on his hands from battles he rarely talked about. He had served in the Earth Space Navy for 20 years. He had seen things that would give most people nightmares. But he slept peacefully because he had learned long ago that rest was a weapon too. The alarm woke him at 3:47 hours. He was on his feet before his eyes fully opened. He pulled on his uniform and walked quickly to the bridge. The crew was already at their stations. Their faces were tense. Something bad had happened. Lieutenant, the communications officer, played the distress signal. Lisa Grant's voice filled the bridge. She was crying now but still talking. Behind her voice, Morgan could hear screaming and plasma fire. He heard her say, and his jaw tightened. Then the signal cut off with a burst of static. The bridge was silent. Admiral John Carter arrived 3 minutes later. He was 60 years old with white hair and eyes that had seen too much death. He had fought in 3 interstellar wars. He had lost friends and family to the darkness between stars. He had learned to keep his emotions locked away, but as he listened to the distress signal, something cold and hard formed in his chest. New Haven Colony, Lieutenant reported. 12,000 civilians, no military presence, no defense platforms. They are completely unprotected. Carter looked at the star map. New Haven was 4 light hours away. If they moved now, they could reach the colony before they finished their harvest. The word made him sick. Harvest, as if people were crops to be gathered and sold. How many ships do they have? Carter asked. 15 confirmed vessels, another officer reported. Standard raiding configuration. Carter nodded slowly. They always brought overwhelming force when they attacked defenseless targets. They were cowards who only fought when victory was certain. They had never faced a human fleet in open battle. They believed humans were soft, weak, unwilling to fight. They were wrong. "Contact all ships in the patrol group," Carter said. His voice was calm, but there was something dangerous underneath. "I want every vessel capable of faster-than-light travel to converge on New Haven immediately. Full combat readiness." Commander Morgan stepped forward. "Rules of engagement, Admiral." Carter turned to look at him. The two men had served together for 15 years. They understood each other without many words. Morgan saw the answer in Carter's eyes before he spoke. "No warnings, no demands, no negotiations." Carter paused and let the weight of his words fill the room. "They targeted helpless civilians, women and children. They gave no mercy. They will receive none." The order went out across the fleet. 23 warships began their preparations for faster-than-light travel. Weapons were loaded. Shields were powered. Crews moved with quiet efficiency. There was no excitement, no cheering. This was not adventure. This was justice. On New Haven, Karen Mitchell was running for her life. She was a schoolteacher, 32 years old with hair and a kind face. When the attack started, she had been teaching a class about Earth history. The children had been learning about ancient wars and the people who fought in them. Now those children were hiding behind her as she led them through the colony's back streets. There were 37 children following her. Some were crying. Some were too scared to make any sound at all. Karen kept her voice steady and told them to stay close. She did not know where she was going. She just knew they had to hide. She found the entrance to the underground water treatment facility. It was an old building that most people had forgotten. She pushed open the door and herded the children inside. They went down into the darkness, down stairs that smelled like metal and moisture. Finally, they reached a room filled with pipes and machines. "Everyone sit down," Karen whispered. "Stay quiet, stay together." A little girl named Emma looked up at her with wide eyes. "Are the bad people going to find us?" Karen knelt down and took Emma's hands. "No, we are going to hide here until help comes." "Is help coming?" Karen did not know the answer, but she had to give these children hope. So she smiled and said, "Yes, help is coming, I promise." Above them, they continued their harvest. They did not know that 37 children were hiding in the darkness. They did not know that a distress signal had been sent. They did not know that an entire fleet was coming for them. They would learn soon enough. The commander was named. He stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched the harvest unfold on the screens below. His gray scales glistened under the artificial lights. His red eyes showed nothing but satisfaction. This was his 43rd raid on a defenseless colony. It would be his easiest. "How many have we gathered?" he asked. His second officer checked the reports. 7,000 so far. The rest are being collected. We will have the full population within 6 hours. Made a sound that might have been laughter. Humans were such pathetic creatures. They cried when they were taken. They begged for mercy. They pleaded for their children. It was amusing in a way that never grew tired of. The weak existed to serve the strong. This was the natural order of the universe. "Any resistance?" he asked. "None worth mentioning. A few tried to fight with farming tools. They are dead now." Nodded. This was how it always went. Agricultural colonies had no soldiers, no weapons, no fighting spirit. They were perfect targets. The humans would fetch good prices at the slave markets. The young ones especially. Buyers paid well for young humans. He did not notice the small drone, watching his ship from 1,000 kilometers away. Lieutenant Amy Brooks sat in a darkened room aboard the scout vessel Swift Shadow. She was 28 years old with short red hair and freckles across her nose. She had trained for years to do exactly what she was doing now. Watching, waiting, marking targets. She controlled 16 stealth drones scattered around the New Haven system. Each drone was smaller than a coffin and painted in colors that absorbed light. They were nearly invisible to sensors. They watched everything and sent the information back to Amy in real time. She saw the ships in orbit, 15 vessels arranged in a loose formation. They were not worried about attack. Why would they be? They had destroyed colonies for generations without consequence. The Galactic Council complained. Other species expressed concern, but no one ever came to stop them. Amy marked each ship on her tactical display. She noted their positions, their weapon systems, their shield strengths. She identified which ships carried soldiers and which carried prisoners. She found the holding areas on the surface where colonists were being gathered. She marked everything. Her hands were steady, but her heart was burning with anger. She had seen the footage from the surface. She had watched soldiers drag screaming children away from their mothers. She had seen old men shot for moving too slowly. She had seen a young woman try to protect her baby and get struck down with a plasma rifle. These images would stay with Amy forever. "Target package complete," she said into her communications link. "Transmitting to Fleet Command." The data flowed across space to the approaching Earth fleet. Admiral Carter received the transmission in his war room. Commander Morgan stood beside him as they studied the tactical display. Every ship was marked. Every ground position was identified. They knew exactly where the enemy was and exactly where the prisoners were being held. "How long until we arrive?" Carter asked. 47 minutes, Morgan replied. Carter nodded. 47 minutes. That was a long time for people suffering at the hands of monsters, but there was nothing he could do to make the ships go faster. The laws of physics did not bend for human anger. "Prepare the battle plan," Carter said. "I want every ship to know their target before we arrive. There will be no confusion and no hesitation. We strike hard and we strike fast." Morgan began issuing orders. The fleet moved through faster-than-light space like a pack of wolves racing toward prey. But these wolves were not hunting the innocent. They were hunting the hunters. On New Haven, Karen Mitchell told stories to the children hiding in the water treatment facility. She talked about Earth, a planet most of these children had never seen. She talked about blue oceans and green forests and mountains covered in snow. She talked about brave heroes from human history who stood up against evil and won. Little Emma sat close to Karen, holding her hand tightly. "Did the heroes always win?" she asked. Karen paused. The truth was complicated. Sometimes heroes lost, sometimes evil won. But these children needed hope, not truth, not right now. "The heroes always came," Karen said softly. "Even when things looked impossible, they always came, and they never gave up on the people who needed them." "Will heroes come for us?" Karen looked at the frightened faces around her. 37 children depending on her to keep them safe and keep them hopeful. She thought about the distress signal that Lisa Grant had sent. She thought about the vast distance between this moon and any help that might exist. "Yes," she said, "heroes will come for us." She hoped she was not lying. Above the planet, they continued their work without concern. They had done this many times before. The process was simple. Gather the population, sort them by age and health, load them onto transport ships, leave the planet empty, move on to the next target. Walk through the largest holding area on the surface. Thousands of humans sat in rows, their hands bound with energy restraints. Some were crying. Some were praying. Some just stared at nothing with empty eyes. Soldiers patrolled the aisles with weapons ready. A human man looked up as passed. He was middle-aged with dirt on his face and blood on his shirt. "Why?" he asked. His voice cracked. "We never did anything to you. Why?" Stopped and looked down at the man. He found the question amusing. Humans always asked why, as if reasons mattered, as if the universe cared about fairness. "Because you are weak," said. "Because you cannot stop us. Because no one will come to save you. That is why." The man lowered his head and said nothing more. Continued his inspection. He checked on the processing teams. He reviewed the cargo manifests. He calculated the profits this harvest would bring. Everything was proceeding according to plan. Then his communication device buzzed. "Commander," his second officer said, "we are detecting multiple faster-than-light signatures at the edge of the system." Frown, this was unexpected. How many signatures? 23. They appear to be military vessels. For the first time in many years, felt something that might have been concern. 23 military vessels. That was not a patrol. That was a battle fleet. But that was impossible. No one sent battle fleets to protect agricultural colonies. No one cared enough. "Identify the ships," he ordered. There was a pause. Then his second officer spoke again, and his voice carried an emotion that had never heard from before. Fear. "They are human ships, Commander. Earth Space Navy. We are detecting 4 heavy cruisers, 12 destroyers, and 1 carrier." Stood very still. Humans, the soft, weak, crying humans. They had sent a battle fleet, a full battle fleet for a single colony. "Contact them," said. "Demand to know their intentions. Tell them this system is under jurisdiction." The message was sent. For a long moment there was no response. Waited, his confidence slowly cracking like ice on a frozen lake. Then the human fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel. 23 ships appeared in perfect formation at the edge of the system. They were beautiful in a terrible way. Sleek hulls of dark metal, weapons arrays that glowed with ready power, shields that shimmered like invisible walls. Admiral Carter's voice came through every frequency. It was calm and cold and carried the weight of certain death. "This is Admiral John Carter of the Earth Space Navy. You have attacked a human colony. You have killed our people. You have taken our children. There will be no negotiation. There will be no surrender. You will all die here today." The channel closed. Stared at the tactical display as the human fleet began to move toward his position. They were not slowing down. They were not sending more messages. They were simply coming. For the first time in his life, understood what it felt like to be the prey. The battle began without ceremony. Admiral Carter gave one order: all ships weapons free. The human fleet opened fire in perfect coordination. 23 ships launched their weapons at the same moment. Plasma bolts streaked across the darkness of space. Missiles flew in tight formations toward their targets. Energy beams cut through the void like knives through silk. The flagship was hit first. Chief Engineer Sam Turner had spent 3 years improving the Indomitable's main batteries. He had increased their power output by 40%. He had refined their targeting systems until they could hit a moving target at extreme range. Now he watched his work prove its worth. The first shot punched through the flagship's shields like they were made of paper. The second shot tore into the hull and started fires in 3 compartments. The third shot hit the engine room and triggered a chain reaction that could not be stopped. Had exactly 4 seconds to understand what was happening before his ship exploded around him. His last thought was one of disbelief. This could not be happening. Humans were weak. Humans were soft. Humans did not fight like this. He was wrong. Captain Davis commanded the destroyer Vengeance. He had served in the Navy for 18 years and had fought in 2 wars. He knew what battle felt like. He knew the fear and the excitement and the terrible beauty of ships fighting among the stars. But he had never felt what he felt now. Cold anger, pure and clean and focused. "Take us into the center of their formation," he ordered. His crew obeyed without hesitation. The Vengeance dove into the heart of the fleet like a hawk striking a flock of pigeons. Davis watched his targeting display and picked his victims one by one. The first ship tried to turn and flee. Davis destroyed its engines with a precision strike, then finished it with a full volley to the reactor. The ship burst apart in a flash of light and debris. The second ship tried to fight back. It launched missiles and fired its plasma cannons in desperate bursts. The Vengeance absorbed the hits with its shields and answered with overwhelming force. 3 shots, 4 shots, 5 shots. The enemy ship broke in half and tumbled through space, burning and dead. The third ship surrendered. It broadcast a signal on all frequencies, begging for mercy, promising to release the prisoners, offering anything to survive. Davis thought about the children he had seen on Amy Brooks's surveillance footage. He thought about the mothers being dragged away from their families. He thought about the old men shot for walking too slowly. "No mercy," he said quietly. Then he gave the order to fire. Across the battlefield, the same scene played out again and again. Human ships hunted ships with brutal efficiency. There was no hesitation. There was no doubt. Every officer and every crew member understood what they were doing and why. Lieutenant Amy Brooks guided the targeting from her position aboard the Swift Shadow. She had the best view of the battlefield and the most detailed information about enemy positions. She fed coordinates to the fleet in real time, helping them avoid hitting areas where prisoners might be held. "Destroyer 7, adjust your firing solution 10 degrees port," she said calmly. "You have a civilian transport in your line of fire." The destroyer adjusted. The shot landed clean. Another ship died. "Cruiser 3, target the enemy vessel at coordinates 772. It is trying to reach the hyperspace jump point." The cruiser turned and fired. The fleeing ship was hit in the engines. It drifted, helpless, until 2 more ships finished it off. Amy worked without rest. Her eyes moved constantly between screens. Her fingers danced over controls. She was the eyes of the fleet, and she made sure every shot counted. On the surface of New Haven, the colonists watched the sky in amazement. They saw flashes of light above the clouds. They saw burning debris falling like meteors. They heard the distant thunder of explosions too far away to feel, and they began to understand what was happening. Someone had come for them. A man named George Palmer stood in the holding area with his hands bound. He had been a farmer before today. Now he was a prisoner waiting to be sold into slavery. He had given up hope hours ago, but as he watched the lights in the sky, hope began to return. "They came," he whispered. "They actually came." The soldiers noticed the battle too. They grew nervous. They shouted at each other in their harsh language. Some tried to contact their ships and received no response. Some began to panic. Their confidence had been built on the belief that no one would oppose them. That belief was dying with every explosion in the sky. Commander Daniel Morgan led the Marine assault teams. While the Navy destroyed the fleet in orbit, the Marines prepared to liberate the surface. 50 landing craft loaded with soldiers waited in the launch bays of the Indomitable. Morgan stood in the lead craft with his rifle in his hands. Around him, men and women in combat armor checked their weapons and waited for the order. They were silent. They were focused. They knew what they had to do. "Landing in 3 minutes," the pilot announced. Morgan looked at his soldiers. "You know the situation. Thousands of civilians being held prisoner, forces on the ground. Our job is to eliminate the enemy and protect the innocent. Rules of engagement are simple. If it is, kill it. If it is human, save it." The soldiers nodded. There were no questions. The landing craft dropped through the atmosphere like stones thrown from heaven. They hit the ground hard outside the main holding area and opened their doors before the dust settled. Marines poured out with weapons ready. The soldiers saw them coming and opened fire. Blue plasma bolts streaked through the air. A Marine fell, hit in the shoulder. Another took cover behind a burning vehicle, but they did not stop. They pushed forward with steady determination. Sergeant Chris Palmer led his squad toward the holding area entrance. He was 26 years old with a young face that made him look like a boy playing soldier. But there was nothing boyish about the way he moved or the way he fought. He had trained for years for moments like this. A soldier stepped out of a doorway and raised its weapon. Palmer shot it twice in the chest before it could fire. The creature fell and did not move again. "Keep moving," Palmer ordered. Civilians first, sweep every building. His squad advanced through the colony. They cleared rooms and checked corners and shot every they found. They moved like water flowing through cracks, relentless and unstoppable. Inside the holding area, the prisoners heard gunfire approaching. George Palmer looked at the other captives. Their faces showed a mix of fear and hope. The shooting was getting closer. Someone was fighting someone was winning. The door to the holding area burst open. Marines rushed in with weapons raised. They scanned the room and saw thousands of bound humans staring back at them. "Clear," a Marine shouted. "Civilians secured." George Palmer felt tears running down his face. He did not try to stop them. Around him, other prisoners began to cry too. Some laughed, some prayed, some simply sat in stunned silence. Sergeant Chris Palmer walked through the crowd, cutting restraints and helping people to their feet. He moved from person to person, speaking softly, offering reassurance. "You are safe now," he said again and again. "We are here, you are safe." An old woman grabbed his arm and looked into his eyes. "Thank you," she said. Her voice broke. "Thank you for coming." Palmer nodded. "We will always come. That is who we are." In orbit, the battle was ending. 15 ships had entered the system. 0 ships remained. The human fleet had not lost a single vessel. They had taken damage, yes. Some crew members were injured, but they had won completely. Admiral Carter watched the final enemy ship explode on his display. He felt no satisfaction, only grim resolve. This was not a victory to celebrate. This was justice delivered, nothing more. "Begin search and rescue operations," he ordered. "Find every survivor. Leave no one behind." The fleet moved into position around the planet. Shuttles launched to assist with evacuation. Medical teams prepared to receive wounded. The work was not finished yet. But the battle was over. The predators had become the prey, and the galaxy would never forget what happened here. The silence after battle was always the hardest part. Admiral Carter walked through the corridors of the Indomitable and saw his crew moving with quiet efficiency. They cleaned weapons. They repaired damaged systems. They treated wounded comrades. No one celebrated. No one cheered. They understood that what they had done was necessary, but that did not make it easy. 800 colonists had died before the fleet arrived. 800 people who had done nothing wrong except live in the wrong place at the wrong time. Carter carried that number with him like a stone in his chest. He would carry it forever. Commander Morgan found him standing by a viewport, looking down at New Haven. The moon was beautiful from orbit. Green continents surrounded by blue oceans. White clouds drifting across the surface. It looked peaceful, as if nothing terrible had happened there. "The recovery teams have found most of the survivors," Morgan reported. "About 11,000 are accounted for. The medical teams are treating the injured. We should have everyone evacuated within 12 hours. Carter nodded but did not speak. Morgan stood beside him in silence for a moment. "The men want to know what happens next. Do we pursue the rest of do we take the fight to their home systems?" Carter finally turned to look at his old friend. "What do you think we should do?" Morgan considered the question carefully. "I think we should send a message, something thee and everyone else in the galaxy will understand, something they will never forget." Carter agreed. He walked to the communications center and found Lieutenant Jennifer Blake at her station. She was young, only 24, with dark skin and intelligent eyes. She had been crying earlier. Carter had seen the tracks on her cheeks, but now she was composed and ready to work. "Lieutenant, I want you to prepare a broadcast on all known frequencies. Maximum power, maximum range. I want every in the galaxy to hear this message." Blake nodded and began preparing the transmission. "What do you want to say, Admiral?" Carter thought about the colonists he had seen being helped onto evacuation shuttles. He thought about the children who had been hiding in the darkness, waiting for rescue. He thought about the bodies being recovered from the streets of New Haven. "Record this," he said. Blake activated the recording system. A red light indicated that every word was being captured. Carter spoke slowly and clearly. "This message is for the Dominion and for every species in known space. Today, the Earth Space Navy destroyed a raiding fleet that attacked the human colony of New Haven. 15 enemy ships were eliminated. No survivors were permitted. This is not a warning. This is a statement of fact." He paused and let the weight of his words settle. "They have made a practice of attacking defenseless settlements. They have hunted the weak. They have enslaved the innocent. They have believed that no one would stop them. They were wrong." Carter's voice hardened. "From this day forward, any attack on a human settlement or any settlement containing humans will be answered with overwhelming force. There will be no negotiation. There will be no ransom. There will be no prisoners taken. This is not a threat. This is a promise." He looked directly at the recording device. "You targeted the helpless. Now you will face the consequences. The Earth fleet came without mercy today. We will come without mercy tomorrow, and the day after that, and every day until you learn that humanity does not abandon its own." The recording ended. Blake transmitted the message across every frequency they could reach. The signal spread outward at the speed of light, racing toward every corner of the galaxy. On the surface of New Haven, the survivors heard the broadcast through speakers set up by the rescue teams. They listened in silence. Some nodded. Some wept. Some simply stared at the sky and wondered what kind of future awaited them. Lisa Grant was alive. She had hidden in a collapsed building during the attack and emerged when the Marines secured the area. Now she walked through the ruined streets of her colony with Commander Morgan beside her. "I sent the distress signal," she said quietly. "I did not think anyone would hear it. I did not think anyone would come." Morgan looked at the destruction around them. Buildings burned. Vehicles lay overturned. Bodies were being collected by recovery teams. It was a scene of horror, but it could have been much worse. "We heard you," he said. "We came as fast as we could." Lisa stopped walking and turned to face him. "Why? The galaxy is full of colonies being attacked. They have been doing this for centuries. No one ever responded like this before. Why did you come for us?" Morgan thought about the question. It was a question he had asked himself many times over the years. Why did humans fight so hard for each other? Why did they refuse to accept the cruelty of the universe? He did not have a perfect answer, but he had an honest one. "Because you were helpless," he said. "Because someone had to protect you. And because we believe that strength without justice is just another form of cruelty." Lisa lowered her head. Tears fell from her eyes and landed in the dust at her feet. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for coming." In the underground water treatment facility, Sergeant Chris Palmer found Karen Mitchell and the 37 children she had protected. They were frightened and hungry but alive, every single one of them. Karen stood up when the Marines entered. Her face was pale and her hands were shaking. She had not slept in over 20 hours. She had kept the children calm through stories and songs and promises that help would come. Now she saw the uniform of an Earth Marine and felt her legs go weak. Palmer walked toward her slowly, not wanting to frighten the children. He knelt down so he could look them in the eyes. They stared at him with a mixture of fear and hope. "My name is Chris," he said gently. "I am a soldier from Earth. I came here to take you somewhere safe. Would you like that?" A little girl named Emma stepped forward. She was the same girl who had asked Karen if heroes would come. "Are you a hero?" she asked. Palmer smiled for the first time in hours. "I am just a person who wanted to help, but I brought a lot of friends with me, and we are going to make sure nothing bad happens to you again." Emma turned to look at Karen. "You were right, the heroes came." Karen knelt down and hugged the little girl tightly. She did not trust herself to speak. The tears came and would not stop. Palmer helped them out of the underground facility and into the daylight. Shuttles were landing all around the colony, picking up survivors and carrying them to the ships in orbit. Medical teams moved through the streets, treating injuries and providing comfort. The Marines had secured every building and eliminated every soldier. New Haven was free. The galactic community received the broadcast from Admiral Carter with varying reactions. Some species were shocked by the violence of the human response. They had never seen such swift and total destruction delivered without hesitation. Others were quietly impressed. They had terrorized the galaxy for generations. No one had ever stood up to them like this. They themselves received the message with something close to terror. Their raiding fleets began pulling back from human space. Their commanders argued about what to do next. Some wanted to continue their attacks and prove that they were not afraid. Others understood that everything had changed. One of their raiding parties had been destroyed completely, not defeated, not driven off, destroyed, every ship, every soldier, every hope of escape. The humans had shown no interest in negotiation or mercy. They had simply killed until nothing was left to kill. For the first time in their history, they began to fear. Admiral Carter did not know what the future would bring. He did not know if they would learn their lesson or if more battles would be necessary. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. Humanity would be ready. The evacuation of New Haven took 14 hours. 11,000 survivors were transported to hospital ships and carriers. They would be taken to Earth and given new homes, new lives, new chances to rebuild what they had lost. As the fleet prepared to leave orbit, Carter stood on the bridge of the Indomitable and watched the green moon grow smaller in the viewport. It was a beautiful place. Maybe someday, humans would return and rebuild the colony. Maybe someday, New Haven would live up to its name. But that was for the future. For now, they had done what needed to be done. They had answered cruelty with strength. They had protected the innocent. They had sent a message that would echo through the galaxy for generations. The Earth fleet came without mercy, and they would come again if they had to. 1 year had passed since the Battle of New Haven. The galaxy had changed in ways that no one could have predicted. The Dominion, which had terrorized dozens of species for centuries, was crumbling. Their raiding fleets no longer ventured near human space. Their slave markets were emptying as buyers feared the consequences of possessing human captives. Their empire was dying slowly, one abandoned colony at a time. Admiral John Carter stood before the United Earth Parliament to answer questions about his actions. Some legislators had concerns about the brutality of the response. They spoke about proportionality and ethics and the image of humanity among other species. They wondered if there had been another way. Carter listened patiently. He had expected these questions. He understood why they were being asked. War was easy to support from a distance. It was harder to face the reality of what war required. When they finished speaking, Carter stood and walked to the center of the chamber. He activated a display screen and showed images from New Haven. Bodies lying in the streets, children crying and holding pens, mothers being torn from their families. "These are the people we saved," he said. 11,000 of them. These are the people we could not save." He showed more images, 800 faces, names, ages, families left behind. They gave these people no chance. They killed without hesitation and without mercy. They would have enslaved everyone else. He turned to face the legislators. "You ask me if there was another way. I ask you, what other way? Should we have negotiated with slavers? Should we have offered them money to release our people? Should we have sent a strongly worded letter to the Galactic Council?" His voice hardened. The galaxy tried those approaches for centuries. They did not work. They continued their raids because no one stopped them. No one was willing to pay the price of stopping them. Humanity decided to pay that price. He paused and let the silence fill the room. "I will not apologize for what we did. I will not pretend that it was clean or easy or pleasant. War never is. But I will tell you this. They will think twice before attacking human civilians again. They will remember what happened at New Haven. They will remember that humanity came without mercy. The chamber was quiet. No one challenged him. No one asked more questions. The vote to officially approve his actions passed by a large margin. On Earth, Karen Mitchell had returned to teaching. She worked at a school in a city far from any. She taught children about history and science and literature. She tried to live a normal life, but she carried New Haven with her every day. The children she had saved visited her sometimes. They had been scattered across Earth, placed with families who wanted to give them homes, but they remembered the woman who had kept them safe in the darkness. They remembered the stories she had told them while explosions shook the ground above. Little Emma was 10 years old now. She came to see Karen on the anniversary of the battle. They sat together in Karen's small apartment and drank tea and talked about simple things: school, friends, the weather. Then Emma asked the question that had been on her mind for a year. Do you think there are other children out there who need saving, other colonies being attacked? Karen set down her cup and looked at the young girl who had grown so much in 12 months. Yes, she said honestly, there are always people who need help. Then why does not everyone help them? Karen thought carefully before answering. Because it is hard, because it is dangerous, because sometimes helping others means making sacrifices that most people are not willing to make. Emma nodded slowly. The soldiers who saved us made sacrifices. Yes, they did. I want to be like them someday. I want to help people who cannot help themselves. Karen smiled and felt tears forming in her eyes. I think you will, Emma. I think you absolutely will. Lieutenant Amy Brooks had been promoted to captain. She commanded her own reconnaissance squadron now, a group of scouts who operated along the edges of human space. They watched. They waited. They gathered information about potential threats. She had received many offers to take safer assignments: desk jobs at headquarters, training positions at the academy, comfortable postings on developed worlds. She had refused them all. The galaxy was still dangerous. There were other species like the predators who preyed on the weak. Amy intended to be the first to spot them when they moved. She intended to give the fleet every advantage she could provide. She thought about New Haven often. She thought about the faces of the survivors as they were loaded onto evacuation shuttles. She thought about the children who had been hiding underground, waiting for rescue that almost came too late. That was why she stayed on the frontier. That was why she accepted the danger and the loneliness. Because somewhere out there, someone might need help, and Amy intended to make sure help arrived in time. Sergeant Chris Palmer gave an interview to a news service on the 1-year anniversary of the battle. The reporter asked him many questions about the fighting, the rescue, the aftermath. Palmer answered them all with simple honesty. Then the reporter asked the question that everyone wanted answered. What message do you hope the galaxy takes from what happened at New Haven? Palmer thought about it for a long moment. He thought about the Marines he had served with. He thought about the people they had saved. He thought about the enemies they had destroyed without hesitation or regret. We protect our own, he said finally. That is the first message. Humanity looks after its people. We do not abandon anyone, no matter how far away they are or how hopeless their situation seems. He paused and looked directly at the camera. The second message is for anyone who might think about attacking human civilians. If you come for the helpless, we will come for you, without mercy, without hesitation, without end. That is who we are. That is who we will always be. The interview was broadcast across human space and beyond. It was translated into dozens of alien languages. Species who had never interacted with humanity watched and listened and drew their own conclusions. Some saw humans as dangerous, violent, unpredictable. They decided to keep their distance, to avoid any contact that might provoke a response. Others saw something different. They saw a species that stood up for its people, a species that punished cruelty and protected innocence, a species that might be worth knowing, worth allying with, worth trusting. The galaxy was changing, old empires were falling, new relationships were forming, and humanity stood at the center of it all, watched by countless eyes, judged by countless minds. Admiral Carter retired from active service 6 months after the battle. He had given enough of his life to war. He settled on a quiet planet and spent his days reading and gardening and watching the stars at night. But he kept his uniform in the closet. He kept his rank and authority, and he made sure that everyone knew he could be recalled at any time for any reason. Because the lesson of New Haven was not just it was for humanity too. The galaxy was vast and dark and full of dangers. Peace was not guaranteed. Safety was not permanent. Humanity had to remain vigilant, remain strong, remain ready to fight for what mattered. The survivors of New Haven never forgot what had happened to them. They carried the memory of that terrible day and the rescue that followed. They told their children about the attack and about the fleet that came to save them. And they passed down one simple truth that became part of human culture across the galaxy. When the helpless call for help, humanity answers. When predators hunt the innocent, humanity hunts them back. When enemies show no mercy, humanity shows none in return. This was the covenant. This was the promise. This was who humans were and who they would always be. The stars were watching, and humanity was ready.